Welcome to Evangelical-ish, where we discuss the good, the bad, and the ugly of the American Evangelical Church, deconstruction, faith, and God's love through it all. Join us for these episodes live on our Evangelical-ish YouTube page on Wednesdays at 9 p.m. Eastern, 8 Central, and 6 o'clock Pacific. Let's journey together.
All right, we are live. Whoops, where are we? There we go. Now I see us all. I'm Paul.
I'm April.
And I'm Jeremy.
There he is. And we are the crew from the Evangelical-ish live event tonight. Glad you guys are with us. Love how we always have people showing up ahead of time and just have this community together to talk about how we're walking out what being evangelical-ish looks like today. And we have some big topics. We need to get right to them. So April, kick us off.
Yes. So this week, Simone Biles is making headlines. It just happened yesterday or 2 days ago. She withdrew from the Olympics citing mental health issues. And to be fair, they were already, the Olympic rules were already not giving her points because they said that no other gymnast could do what she could do. So they weren't going to reward her for being able to do that. And then on top of that, I was looking it up and she cited that she was having a case of the twisties. I don't know if y'all read into that, but that's a thing that a lot of gymnasts have. And it's just when your body suddenly can't remember where it is in the air, and it can cause major damage.
Yep.
In golf, that's known as the yips, when suddenly your body just can't do what it knows to do.
And baseball too.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's just like your body just forgets. It's something you've done hundreds and hundreds of thousands of times, and then your body just can't do it anymore. So she was experiencing a bit of that. And then she competed, and basically she stumbled, didn't do super well. So she was already feeling that. So she withdrew, citing mental health issues.
And if I can jump in right there, the difference between the yips in baseball and golf is the yips are embarrassing. The twisties are life endangering. You're in midair, upside down when this happens.
Well, and that's exactly what I was going to talk about. Because I remember John Lester. Was it John Lester?
Yeah, he cannot throw the ball to first base.
He can't throw the ball to first base. But let me tell you how many lives are in danger when John Lester can't throw the ball to first base. The answer is zero.
Right.
Because he just basically rolls it over there. When you're 8, 9, 10 feet in the air, doing things that literally nobody in the world can do. And there is potential for some serious physical damage. And so they even said that on the broadcast the other night. The commentator said, "Oh my gosh, she got lost in the air."
Right.
That sounds like a nothing passing comment to us, but do you have any idea how scary that would be? Anybody who's done a front flip off a diving board in a pool. I mean, to this day, I do that with my kids, but it makes me nervous. Right.
Yeah.
I can't imagine. So anyway, sorry, continue.
No, I mean, you're absolutely right. You could land on your head, and people have been starting to make comparisons to other gymnasts in the past that either pushed through or were forced to push through. And she's getting lots of flack online from typically the more conservative of us, saying she's a quitter. I think Charlie Kirk went on some rant, Paul, that you sent, saying she was a selfish sociopath.
I want to punch Charlie Kirk right in the gonads.
Yeah, he's definitely got a punchable face. There is no doubt about that. Top 5 punchable face of all time, to be honest.
Yeah, it's really disheartening. Thankfully, I've weeded out my Facebook enough that I didn't see a lot of Simone Biles slander, because I would not have stood for it. But unfortunately, I don't know why, but I still follow Fox News. And so the article where they wrote about her withdrawing, I did the unfortunate thing and read some of the comments, and they were just really nasty and degrading. And I think it's important for a lot of people to realize that Simone Biles has pretty much been doing this her whole life. Her childhood was taken up by gymnastics, and she was one of the victims of the whole sexual assault scandal that happened on the U.S. Olympic teams. People just forget, good for her for putting herself first over a golden medal. And I think it brings up a good conversation of these kids. yeah, it's amazing that they get to go and compete for your country in the Olympics, but they've pretty much given up their childhood.
Yeah.
Well, and not only that, but a lot of folks have compared or tried to draw a very poor comparison between Simone Biles and her mental health with the '96 Olympics in Atlanta with
Carrie Strug.
Carrie Strug. Thank you. Sorry, I just blanked that.
Who, by the way, also was cajoled into putting her health at risk for a gold medal that day.
But that's what I was going to say. And there is an extremely disturbing picture after Carrie Strug gets off of the mat there and begins to, she's crying, she's in agonizing pain. And who are the coaches handing her off to? Larry Nassar.
Yeah.
And there's a place where they're reaching for each other's hands. And to view that from 2021 is disturbing and gross and horrible. And so but here's the thing, as a football coach, one thing that I want people to understand, number one, I'm never going to be like, hey, tough it out. You're going to be fine, whatever. When kids are citing mental issues, right? Because we have a really poor habit of comparing physical issues outweigh mental issues. And that is by no stretch of the imagination true. Both can be extremely damaging in the short term and the long term for an athlete, for a kid, for a student. And so for Simone to be aware of her mental health, to be aware of her body, and to make the best choice for her long term is to be commended. That's a champion move. That's a champion move. And for the people who are out there going, well, she quit on the team, she quit on the United States. Notice she's not competing individually either. Importantly to note. On top of that, do you think that she worked 5 years just to pull herself out in the middle of the event? You really think she wanted to do that? The greatest of all time? She's got a competitive streak that rivals that of a Michael Jordan. Right. So she didn't want to exit the competition. And so this nonsense, I can't stand it. And it's all coming from guys who, their greatest accomplishment was, their third place men's beer league finish or whatever. And I just can't get with that. Like, I'm sorry. I know I made a video about it today. It just irritates me because it's like, man, just shut up. Like, you have no idea. You have no idea what it's like. And so, you don't get to say, and she doesn't know us anything.
Right. I think Stephanie made a good point in the chat too. She said the worst part that if she had tried to compete and totally bombed, people would be mad at her for not withdrawing or for doing poorly.
Yeah. My wife made a really good point earlier. She goes, you know what the issue here is that people probably place money literally on her finishing well. And so there's probably a handful of people who had legitimately bet on Simone Biles as sports betting gets bigger in the United States. And now you're getting all this backlash because people are legitimately angry. Sports betting has grown leaps and bounds in the United States because it's legalized in a lot of places now. And so,
Well, and I think this Charlie Kirk thing, though, is, this is the guy that started sort of the young Hitler's club, that now is the really important young Republican spokesperson. And his thing was, we're raising a generation of wimps and all of that stuff. And I'm jumping ahead a little bit in our show here, but I'm listening to this Rise and Fall of Mars Hill podcast, which is fantastic. And they just dropped a new issue today, a new episode today. And this was the Mark Driscoll thing. And they had Kristen Kobes-Dumé on there, who wrote Jesus and John Wayne. And she was talking about how after 9/11, you had evangelical pastors saying, we're being attacked because of the wussification of the American male, and that scary guys in Islamic beards are coming after us, and we're having promise keeper meetings and hugging each other and crying. And so this idea that Simone Biles let down the country And Charlie Kirk was talking about how horrified he was that the Russians got the gold and they were mocking us because they got the gold. This son of a bitch wants Simone Biles to put her life at risk so he doesn't have to watch the Russians win a gold medal.
It's so stupid.
I mean, it is a nationalistic misplacement of masculinity that somehow America's great because we have tougher men than everybody else. And this woman now has ruined our chance to feel stronger than the Ruskies. I mean, it is ludicrous.
Is this the same Charlie Kirk that employs police officers in cities where he goes and does his garbage on college campuses? Is that the same Charlie Kirk? The one that thinks everybody needs to toughen up and there's a bunch of wimps? Is that the same one?
It sounds like the same one, but I don't.
Yeah, it's the same one. Don't worry, it's the same one. He takes employed bodyguards from local police departments with him onto college campuses.
What a punk.
So
I always get him and Ben Shapiro. I get him and Ben Shapiro confused.
Oh, they're the same. They're the same guy.
Yeah, I feel like they are kind of.
They share the same brain.
Mark Driscoll also punchable. We'll get into that in a little bit.
But Charlie Kirk is the guy that during the 2016 election, I think it was, that was having the group meeting, and they were giving the Nazi salute, saying "Hail Trump." This is who this guy is, and again, it's a really disgusting, misplaced Christian conservative nationalism that believes putting country ahead of self is Christian and righteous.
It's the ultimate negative side of the whole America First movement, where somehow representing.
Is there a positive side to it?
No, I don't think there is, but it goes beyond just like politics and trying to keep us, safe in foreign affairs and put us first, whatever. But the fact that this is a sport, and not that sports are not fun and important, but it's a sport at the end of the day. And this is Simone Biles' life, and she's just representing a symbol of our country.
I was just reading this comment. Sorry, it's so good.
We need a Letterman style most punchable place. That could be, maybe we could start doing like a top 10 list at the end to like interchange with our hate comments.
I think that is a fantastic idea. And as a matter of fact, I think next week we should give the Evangelicalish top 10 most punchable faces. I think we should do that next week.
Officially.
Anyway, sorry.
Yeah. Anyway, I think we've covered this. We actually have a pretty full episode tonight. So
to put a point on what you're saying, April, how big of a man are you if your manliness has to be bolstered by an American women's gymnastics gold medal?
Seriously.
How much of a man are you really when you get right down to it? So let's stop being silly.
How small is it really?
How small is it?
I bet he drives a really big truck.
They always do.
Yeah,
absolutely.
Really
Lots of guns and animal heads in his house, probably.
Just compensating for all that is not there.
Yes.
All right. Do we want to mid-roll and go to the next topic?
Let's mid-roll.
Roll it. Are you loving Evangelicalish? Follow us to catch all the latest content and encouragement. You can check us out on TikTok by following @Evangelicalish, or subscribe on YouTube by searching Evangelical-ish. That's Evangelical with an ISH. And don't forget to catch our live streams each and every single Wednesday night on YouTube at 9 Eastern, 8 Central, and 6 Pacific. And now, back to the Evangelical-ish podcast.
I think is Jeremy up now?
Oh,
we lost him.
He got raptured.
The rapture has occurred, and the beast was taken.
He just texted and said he needs to step out for a bit. Well, alrighty. All
right. Well, he was introing our next segment. Am I wrong in that?
You're not wrong in that. Do you want to take it? And we'll flip it.
So, and I actually hate to go into this with laughter because it's another terrible thing where we see Christian conservatives again revealing the ugly heart of our belief system that has become so intertwined with politics and nationalism. It's the January 6th hearings taking place in Washington this week that have become politicized events. And my question is, how could you hear the police officers testifying yesterday and have the hard-heartedness that we've seen in evangelical circles. So we're going to play some videos here, and we want to warn you, these are very difficult to hear. We're going to hear about violence in the first video and in the second video, and I'll warn you again before we run the second video, but we decided, and really it was me, I didn't give Jeremy and April a lot of time to think about this, but we're not bleeping out racial epithets in the testimony of a black man. And so I just want to let you know that these are difficult to hear. And if you want to turn off your sound while this video is on the screen and look away, because I think it's also captioned, please do so, because it is gut-wrenching and painful to hear, but we thought worth hearing so we could feel the pain and the truth of what happened on January 6th. So here's a couple of officers to start.
Point during the fighting, I was dragged from the line of officers and into the crowd. I heard someone scream, "I got one." They began to beat me with their fists and with what felt like hard metal objects. At one point, I came face to face with an attacker who repeatedly lunged for me and attempted to remove my firearm. I heard chanting from some in the crowd, "Get his gun," and "Kill him with his own gun." I was aware enough to recognize I was at risk of being stripped of and killed with my own firearm.
I too was being crushed by the rioters. I could feel myself losing oxygen and recall thinking to myself, this is how I'm going to die. The same people who we helped, the same people who we gave them the borrowed time to get to safety, now they're attacking us, they're attacking our characters. We got people right now in front of the Justice Department asking to release some of the very same people to be released, even though we are testifying about the trauma and the agony and everything that happened to us. It's pathetic, and they shouldn't be elected official anymore.
So many of the people I put my life at risk to defend are downplaying or outright denying what happened. I feel like I went to hell and back to protect them and the people in this room. But too many are now telling me that hell doesn't exist, or that hell actually wasn't that bad.
So now next is Officer Harry Dunn. And again, there's really difficult language here. If you are definitely bugged by violence and racial epithet, please turn off your sound and look away from the screen here for just about a minute.
Just leave the Capitol. And in response, they yelled, "No, man, this is our house. President Trump invited us here. We're here to stop the steal. Joe Biden is not the president. Nobody voted for Joe Biden." I responded, "Well, I voted for Joe Biden. Does my vote not count? Am I nobody?" That prompted a torrent of racial epithets. One woman in a pink MAGA shirt yelled, "You hear that, guys? This nigger voted for Joe Biden." Then the crowd, perhaps around 20 people, joined in screaming, "Boo, fucking nigger." No one had ever called me a nigger while wearing the uniform of a Capitol Police officer. In the days following the attempted insurrection, other Black officers shared with me their own stories of racial abuse on January 6th. One officer told me he had never, and in his entire 40 years of life, been called a nigger to his face, and that streak ended on January 6th.
So I played a portion of that video on my TikTok page and had one of my normal Christian trolls say, "Oh, what a tough guy," crying because he saw a pink MAGA shirt. Guys, who are we? What have we become?
I saw a lot of people on Twitter and Facebook and all of the places. Some people, very well-known GOP, call them pussies, and basically make fun of them for being grown men crying on TV. These were police officers fighting for their lives. And I saw in one of the testimonies, they said that they saw several of the thin blue line for the Blue Lives Matter police flag in the mob that was attacking the police. And it's so heartbreaking that the main pushback against these men are white Christians. Should we not be embodying love when these men are pouring out their hearts and giving their testimonies, which has to be traumatic for them to relive on national television alone? And we can't even, some people were saying these were paid actors, that they were being paid to lie, that they made it all up. And just even the whole idea that somehow a man crying is a negative thing.
Yeah.
I don't know how we got here.
Yeah, sometimes we have fun with some of the idiosyncrasies that evangelicalism has come to today. But when we're talking about people's lives, and I mean, even if I don't understand, no matter what your political beliefs, how you could mock that. But then to do so as being somebody that is in the Blue Lives Matter crowd and has passionate hatred for BLM because you stand with the police and the military, it just shows the hypocrisy at the center of it all.
Yeah.
And, one of the things that I think Jesus hated about the religious leaders of his day was that their core beliefs were at its very heart built around race, nationality, and religion. Our race, our nation, our religion carries the heart of God. And if our race, our religion, and our nation are not at the center of everything, then God's plan will not exist on earth. And Jesus never once ever said, well, you sort of got it right. He said, if you live in this belief system, you will lose your eyes to see and ears to hear what's happening in the season. And I 100% believe we're in the exact same season in history where we have a church that is so intertwined, its belief system, with race, nationality, and religion, that our race, our nationality, and our religion. And by race, I don't mean you could say, well, I have Hispanic friends or Black friends, but they still have to assimilate to our belief system and our nationality and our religion to be acceptable. And I believe if you live in a mindset like that long enough, it starts to have an impact where you no longer have eyes to see and ears to hear. And so you could watch something like that and call them the P word and say, why are you crying at a pink t-shirt? Again, start making these sort of homophobic statements in the middle of it. We have become what Jesus despised in the New Testament.
Well, and it's a total lack of empathy. It's also just a refusal to listen. They would rather make fun of these guys and demonize these guys who could have easily lost their lives that day.
Yeah.
Protecting another part of the testimony was they said that it was hard on them to protect a lot of the congressmen that are now saying it wasn't that bad and trying to gaslight them. It's like, no, you're imagining it. It really wasn't that bad. You didn't almost die. You didn't have a heart attack. Everyone was peaceful. Just
Donald Trump said this week there was nothing but love there. Nothing but love there.
Just the audacity. I have days where I try to laugh about the craziness of it all because I otherwise would go crazy. But then today is just one of those days after watching those testimonies where I don't know what to do. I feel very a little discouraged with where we are because I see a huge chunk of the country just not caring about other people unless they're in their own groupthink.
Yeah. Yeah, I keep coming back to the history of the world, and certainly the story of the Bible is when a church starts living this way and becomes this representation of God to the world, God eventually says, wow, I'm going to have to do something here. And what we see when you read through the Old Testament, the book of Judges, that culture gets overturned.
Mm-hmm.
And like I said, Jesus said about the temple, not one stone of that thing's going to stand on another. And so I just wonder, like, God, you can't allow this church to go on. And we've talked about how I think in 25 years, the evangelical church is going to be so marginalized and so little a factor in our country because the millennials and Gen Zers are saying, now we're good, no thanks.
Yeah.
But I think evangelicals need to realize how incredibly sick this is and how incredibly sick they've become under the influence of this groupthink and this mindset. I believe it's what Paul called in the Bible a principality. We don't wrestle against flesh and blood, but against mindsets that cause us to live this way. And I can't, I'm like, yeah, there's no joke I can make about this. This is horrific and traumatic for people.
How do you think, well, I mean, how we got here is a much larger conversation. And there's already people that have written books on how we got here, like Jesus and John Wayne and all of that. But maybe the better question is, now that we're here, how do we move past this? Not saving evangelicalism, because it's not worth saving, but how do we save the people that have been swept under this? I mean, it's brainwashing, quite frankly. And I have to ask God to help me love them, because I have days where I'm just so angry at the hurt that these people are causing in the name of the Jesus that I love, in the name of Jesus who loves everybody. And these people, I don't know. I don't have the words. I don't know how we move past it and how we get back to love thy neighbor. Full stop. The greatest commandment is just to love. And somehow we've twisted that, and we've given Jesus an AR-15, and we've made him white, and he's somehow not only American, he's Republican, and he chose Donald Trump to save America from, which is insane, but there's actually people that believe he chose Donald Trump to save America from a giant sex trafficking ring because these reptilian aliens have infiltrated Democrats and they are drinking children's blood to stay young. That is an actual belief.
Joe Biden referred to it in an interview with the media the other day. Yeah. It's
not just like in a small corner of the country. Like, it somehow is trickled into a somewhat mainstream belief. And I see a lot of people that I don't think believe the extremes of it, but are still sharing stuff from that cult. I mean, it's a cult. And how do we save our loved ones from this cult?
Yeah. Well, there's a couple of questions in there, and one of the things that you're asking is sort of, where do we go from here? And I would say to you and to many of our commenters here, but to you particularly, April, I mean, you're doing it. I think what we have to do is, I mean, I feel like for 2 years, God sort of had me going to the church and saying, hey guys, are you willing to look in the mirror and consider who we've become? And the church said, hell no, we won't go. And in Ezekiel, God said to Ezekiel, I'm going to send you to your own people, and they're not going to listen, but you make the declaration and then we'll go from there. And so I really feel like there's not a lot we can do to change where the evangelical church is at this point. So what you're doing so fabulously with your TikToks, and so many of us are trying to communicate to people in this deconstruction community, is don't go back there, because there's a lot of guilt, a lot of shame. Oh, you're falling away, you're leaving Jesus. And I think what we're saying is, no, you're actually running away from where Jesus no longer is hanging out, and trying to go toward where God actually is in the season, and where Jesus actually would be if he was incarnate. So I would say you're doing what we're supposed to do going forward, and telling people it's okay. Don't go back to that thing because it's dark at its core. That doesn't mean there's not good people in it and not good churches in the middle of it. But at its core, the overarching mindset has become so tainted that I wouldn't encourage anybody to go back into it.
Yeah, I think that's a good point. And that was a conviction that I kind of have come to recently, is that I can't support a physical evangelical church anymore. Just my own convictions. Even if there's good people in it, even if the pastor himself or herself, it's evangelical, it's probably himself, is a good person. I just can't support the machine that is keeping the wheels running of just a lot of darkness. And, I think you and I both get pushback a lot from Christians that are like, oh, it's not all churches. Oh, no, don't cause division. Oh, it's not all, yeah, okay, maybe some bad apples. It's not all bad. Look at all the good. Look at all the good.
Yeah.
And I am so done with that argument, because bad people do good things all the time and good people do bad things all of the time. And all that does is just sweep it under the rug. And I just want to do good. I don't want to support an organization that is constantly having to cover up or justify bad things because they have a showmanship version of good. I just want to do good. Period.
Oof. Preach. And I'm reading the comments from people who have lost family. And I just keep reminding people that in the middle of it all, Jesus had to say about his own mother, like, no, that's not my mom. These people who are believing truth and going where God is going, those are my people. And so it's okay. It's okay for us to build boundaries in this season. And the interesting thing, I think we miss, unity is a shut up word that the church uses a lot now. Unity, that means shut up and don't share hard things. And looking at things corporately, that Jesus said, oh, Jerusalem, you who killed the prophets. Now, not everybody in Jerusalem killed a prophet, but the spirit of the city was, we don't want to hear what the prophets have to say. And that's where we are, I believe, is now I'm filling my false prophet role here, April. I think we're at a place where the Jesus would say to the church, dear church, Sodom's going to have a better judgment day than you. And just like he did to Capernaum at the time. And so I just want to give people permission to say, something in my heart is telling me Jesus is not back there. And I want to say, I agree. Jesus is not back there. And Jesus is going somewhere else, and go with that. And the story looks different than what we've been told. And so I think what you and Jeremy and so many other great deconstructing evangelicals and Mormons and Catholics on TikTok are doing is giving people permission to say, no, thanks, I'm not going back.
Well, and thanks to the internet and maybe the pandemic, but they can't silence us on there unless we get banned, which I guess technically they try to do that. But, for so long within churches, you're not allowed to talk about it.
Yeah.
If you have doubts, Jeremy said he's back.
Yeah, people have been worried about Jeremy.
Yes, Jeremy had children issues.
He didn't get raptured. He took care of kid issues, and now he's back.
Yeah. The pastor from Oklahoma got sucked up into the sky.
People were asking if your clothes were left in the chair.
They were folded perfectly, neatly, like the garments at the tomb.
This is Elizabeth says, we're also on our way out. Media team and children's ministry people. Wow. Lydia Gibson says, my husband and I just moved, and to be honest, we're not going to try to find a new church here. And so I think, Jeremy, part of what we're talking about is, where do we go from here? And some is, I'm giving people permission and saying, you don't have to go back to the church building, and you don't have to give up your faith. There is room for faith and spirituality out there that you're actually not going to find perhaps in a church building, that you can find somewhere else. And that's the space we're trying to provide.
Well, and I think, I would say that, that there is something really important and imperative, though, about community, right? And I think that's why the evangelicalish thing has been such a blessing to so many folks, is because they feel like they're finding that community here, which is awesome. But it is something that I think is important and imperative to us as, so for me personally, as somebody who's a follower of Jesus, to have community of like-minded people around me that I'm walking through and able to journey through with is so important. That is becoming harder and harder to find, though, within the traditional church. As a matter of fact, I would almost say damn near impossible in the traditional church here in America. And that's the reason you see, and I even posted a video about this a couple of days ago. What if the revival that has been prayed for so long by so many people, I know probably all three of us have prayed for revival actively, in our past lives and in this one too, that God would actively change things. What if that revival is deconstruction? What if it is the bookend to the evangelical church in America? What if it is these people who are rising up and saying, no, this doesn't match Jesus. Like, I'm sorry, but I'm not going to be a part of the bigotry anymore. And what if those who, the great falling away, the Second Thessalonians passage or whatever, what if that is literally the American church sprinting in the opposite direction, waving the flag of, Jesus and Trump, but running away so hard from God? What if that is indeed the great falling away? So I think with those things in mind, I think there's still some very core principles and foundations that are important. The teachings of Jesus, foundationally important. The community, we are made to be in community. We are people made for community. I truly, honestly, deeply believe that. And so I think it is important that people find safe community together.
I think so. Some practical things that I've done that have found community outside of the church is one, TikTok, which is how I found you two and a bunch of other amazing people.
Yeah.
But I know it's harder for people that are not making content on TikTok. So another thing that I did, which is also, perfect storm. They're not going on really right now, but I went to a lot of Black Lives Matter protests locally last summer and met a lot of, because this is still a Southern town. So most of the people that were there were Christian, but they were just more progressive or, just social justice aware Christians. And I made a lot of great friends that way. Another thing to do is I recently became a member of my local NAACP chapter. And so I've made friends that way and I volunteer to help them. And I think you can find ways to volunteer in different communities and nonprofits within your community and find community that way. But also at the end of the day, if you can find one other person in your area that is deconstructing or just wants to have a heart-to-heart or have deep conversation, that's church.
Yeah.
Like the Bible says, where 2 or 3 are gathered in my name, I'm there. And we don't need a brick building with hundreds and thousands of people. We just need 2 or 3 to break bread together. And another thing that was practical that I haven't mentioned, someone mentioned it in the comments, but I do go to Paul's when I can. He has a Zoom community on Sundays and it's open to everybody. And it is seriously one of the most healing things. We do communion every single Sunday and it's all over Zoom, but there's something really beautiful about breaking bread with people, even though it's virtual.
Yeah.
For people from all over the world. There's a couple from Italy and it's a really cool experience.
We and I fought against doing it the whole time because I didn't want to start some new church, but I saw somebody say like, "Oh, I missed the Eucharist," and so I think the taking of communion together is important. But a lot of people are shamed with the idea from Hebrews 6 that says, "Let us not forsake the gathering of ourselves together." But then forget that that verse was written at a time when Christians could not meet in buildings. It was against the law for them to meet in buildings, and so they were meeting in homes at that time. So it's okay to gather not in a building.
Well, and it's okay to meet in non-traditional ways. I mean, just in general, right? Like we don't need it to have the tag, the First Baptist, wherever, the First Church of whatever. It's just what does scripture say? I mean, where 2 or 3 are gathered, right? I mean, just there wasn't like a where 2 or 3 are gathered and they carry a 501c3 and a action word, awesome, crazy, magical cat time church or whatever, just like I don't get it. And so do I think that there's benefit to some organization to that process? Yes. But it's, I only say that because because what I envision for the church and for its people moving ahead would be that we would be those hands and feet of Jesus, that we would be that benevolent, active, cause in the community to make better communities, better areas. And so, I think there's some good to some organization, but I just think, I think that community is good for the soul, but also community is good for the cause that it can do if it's done right.
Yeah.
And that's the problem with the evangelical church. I think the bad outweighs the good at this point. For all the positive things. And I've talked a lot about the SBC specifically because I come from that background. I think the things that they're doing internationally with missions and stuff like that is great. I've seen some of that work, but then at the same time, it's like all the other garbage. And it's like, guys, with the cooperative program, it's super cool, but the bad outweighs the good at this point. It's just not worth it anymore.
And I think where you're absolutely right, Jeremy. Hebrews 6 also says, "Let us consider how to stir one another up toward, works and good deeds."
Yeah.
And so I think there is something about us, doing relationship together. That verse literally is like, "Let's irritate one another, like a piece of sand irritates an oyster to make a pearl." It's a let's be accountable to one another, not accountable to a pastor or the man of God from the church, but be accountable to one another so that we're walking with Jesus. And we need somebody every once in a while from the outside to say, "Hey, wait a second, you're not acting like yourself today." And so that's where I think finding that community and a community around faith really is important.
Liv just said in the chat that she is, I guess, from Kansas, Oklahoma. I don't know. I just saw that she said something about Kansas, Oklahoma.
Is that a town? Kansas,
it's a town.
Oklahoma?
Kansas, Oklahoma is a town.
That's hilarious.
And I have literally been there for like a class. I forget, maybe a Class B 8-man.
Is there a town in Kansas called Oklahoma?
There should be. Yeah. There should be. That would be fantastic. What a trade out. Yeah.
I wonder if I was just thinking about this. So just as a quick shout out, I've officially created a Twitter account, an Instagram, and a Facebook page for Evangelicalish. And it's just at Evangelicalish on all things. I think someone actually mentioned this to us a month or so, and then we just haven't done it. But I'm curious in the chat if we made a Facebook group, like a private Facebook group, and could give everyone the link and invite everyone just for community throughout the week. I don't know if that would be something that would be beneficial to the people here.
So I'm actually part of another group very similar to that. What is it?
Well, there's several. There's several.
I know that there's a ton of them out there, but like for anything, like if you underwater basket weave, you can find a group,
right?
But there's one. I was going to equate it to one very similar, recovering fundamentalist podcast group or whatever, which they have a really good podcast, the Recovering Fundamentalists. But I'm a part of that group, and it's super cool, just really good, like-minded discussion, like people just diving into things. And, sometimes people hit a little bit more conservative than me, but whatever, but it's always like, so they screen everybody who comes in. And so it's like it's a very safe space for like good dialogue. Right. And so I would love to see us do something like that. I think that would be awesome.
A lot of people are jumping on that, April.
Yeah. So, and I think because there's a lot out there, but some of the groups get kind of large and start having thousands and thousands of people. So if we keep it,
keep it here in the family.
Keep it local. Yeah. I mean, anyone can join, but I don't know that we're all that.
I hear some people saying, could it be Discord or I don't know. There's so many of them now, but we'll figure it out. Get out to you. This actually may be a good transition though into our next topic. I mentioned earlier, I'm listening to, if you haven't listened to The Rise and Fall of Mars Hill, it's a fantastic podcast. And if you don't know what Mars Hill is, you can go research that. It was a church in Seattle that grew really big and then disappeared in like a day.
When Paul says it's fantastic, what he means is it's like watching two trains collide and you just can't look away.
It is. It's actually extremely painful and triggering for me to listen to, but I can't take my eyes off it. And then somebody alerted me to a podcast called Heaven Bent, and they did a season last year about the Toronto Blessing, if you know anything about the Vineyard movement and the Vineyard Association of Churches. And this season are doing a podcast series on Bethel Church in Reading, which is a really big, powerful church of about 11,000 people known all over the world. Their music has influenced all of Christian music, and all of them happen to be really good friends of me and my wife. And the podcast again is about the same. It's a train wreck that you're watching, and it's so painful. And it got us talking today, the three of us, and we would love to hear your guys' thoughts in the comments of like, when can we say, I see the ugliness and the ugly heart of the evangelicalism I grew up with, but there were good things. There were things that positively impacted my life. And do we have to turn our back on all of those things? Or is there a problem with sort of this baby with the bathwater? We have to go to all the other extreme of the continuum. Or can I say, Bill Johnson, the pastor of Bethel Church, taught lessons that really positively impacted my life, while understanding then when he did an article in Christianity Today that said you're not a Christian if you didn't vote for Donald Trump. That was seriously wrong. And that ultimately facilitated me having to get out of evangelicalism. So I don't know, how are you guys dealing with this, April and Jeremy, of turning away from this ugliness that we're seeing in our religious heritage, but not maybe throwing everything out, or being careful not to throw everything out? Or do we throw everything out?
I think at a certain point, for me, it's just hard for me to take people like Bill Johnson, definitely Greg Locke. I've never taken him seriously.
But there's nothing good with Greg Locke. There's nothing redeemable about that. I'm sorry. He's married to his former secretary, or maybe still be his current secretary. I don't know, but like, I mean, the dude is a wackadoodle. Anyway, sorry.
Yeah, but like, so I mean, I've had issues with Bethel for a long time. I don't need to go into them, but it's been really hard for me since the Trump years, for all of the pastors that have basically thrown out whatever moral compass I thought they had to defend and support and justify the things that Trump said and did. And I am to a point where I can't get past it. Now, what I'm struggling with evangelicalism as a whole are good memories that I have of being in evangelical churches, good spiritual experiences that I've had, and trying to separate those of, I can have a good experience with God in a place that wasn't perfect and hold on to that while still being okay with burning it down now. I don't know if that answers your question. It's hard for me to still find good at this point. Like, I can recognize that they can help the community and that they can still do good things, but kind of like what I was saying to you, Paul, earlier, you missed it, Jeremy. I'm done with the churches trying to justify the bad by saying, oh, but look at all the good. Like, I just want the good. If there's too much bad, like, I don't care about your good.
Well, I'll push back on that just a touch. And I think Joy said something really interesting. She said, and I actually really like this statement. She said, I think we do have to be careful throwing out everything. The pendulum swing to another extreme is usually not great. I think that there's some good truth to that. I think we have to be careful. Sometimes it's like when you're a part of an organization or you're a part of a company or something like that, change for the sake of changing sake is not necessarily always the best reason to change. I think we need to look at what's broken and fix it. But if there are things that were good, I think about a friend of mine who was a part of the International Mission Board with the Southern Baptists. He no longer is now, but was spending time in the Mayan zone in Mexico and wasn't spending a ton of time proselytizing and evangelizing to these people, was literally installing stoves into their homes that had no electricity or water because they kept an open campfire in the middle of their grass hut going 24/7, 365. And the babies, when they were bringing doctors in, they were saying that the kids were like basically having an equivalent of smoking 2 packs a day because they were inhaling all of this smoke and everything. So what did he do? He comes in and he starts bringing in these stoves that are ventilating the smoke out of the hut. They're dual purpose. They're bringing heat and they're bringing the ability to cook. They're using less resources because they've got lava rocks. So they're staying heated with less wood. So all of those things are really good, but do I want to throw that out just because it's a part of what evangelicalism was? No, I don't. I want to keep it, right? So I think we need to be really, really careful not to just throw things out for the sake of throwing them out, but looking and going, what is harmful? What is hurtful? What is against the message and the person of Jesus and the message and the reality of the gospel? What are those things that are not matching up? And those things are the things that must absolutely, no questions asked, they must go.
Yeah.
And
I
so
appreciate what you're saying there, Jeremy. And sort of what it looks for me a little bit is like, I'm done with the evangelical church. I'm done with it. And I actually think God's done with it.
I agree.
100%. And that means probably some good things are going to go away with the bad. I think I'm just saying we need to be careful to try to keep the good. You know what I'm saying? I'm not saying we need to keep the American evangelical church. I've said it multiple times. Right. Gasoline, not water. Right. But I think we need to be careful not to just burn it all just for the sake of burning it all. Sometimes the overcorrection is as bad as what you're trying to correct. I get it. Yes. I think for me, so there's a couple of things for me of there. People are saying, but I don't want to lose Jesus, and I try to say, don't let bad evangelicals take your faith away from you. If you still want to pursue a life of following Jesus, don't let the disappointment of a leader take that from you. And for me, as I've really been sort of thinking this through, one of the things that is in my Christian tradition is the supernatural, that heaven can interact with earth. And I've really had to think of like, well, do I believe that anymore or not? I've changed the way that I pray, but I've decided like there is still something bigger than the universe. And if I can get wisdom from heaven, I don't want to lose that. And I've seen enough crazy shit that I think there is something that can happen from heaven to earth. And I don't want to just throw that out because I'm angry at Bethel or Mars Hill or any other church out there. I want to still be able to have that interaction with heaven in my life. And and if people are finding that peace in the meditation of prayer or something, I think we just need to be careful. I want to be careful for me, and I want to give permission for others that if there are still good things to hang on to, it's okay. You get to work out those things individually. Well, and I think also it's important to remember not only that, but I posted a video on my TikTok here a while back saying, let's not replace toxic with toxic. In other words, there are some good things that we would be wise to carry over. But there's also some bad things that because we've been indoctrinated and ingrained with these certain gears, right? Like we almost bring those over into the deconstruction space as well. And I think that can be dangerous too, to bring over some of that toxic evangelical culture, that cliquish, hateful, like us versus them culture
is also very dangerous as well. So I think there's something to be said for both sides. I think about I had a student in my student ministry when I was first starting out, probably 2010, 2012, somewhere along that area. Came from a very dysfunctional home background. Parents, no dad at all in the picture. Mom was always gone, different boyfriend all the time. I mean, he grew up in a really tough environment, financially not well off. And then he found Mark Driscoll and he began to read, I think at the time it was Vintage Jesus. And he radically fell in love with Jesus and MMA, like hand in hand at the same time. And so he started wrestling for the school. Well, that like built his discipline. And he started just loving Jesus and being the hands and feet. I remember one summer, this kid went to a widow's house in our church and mowed her lawn every single week for free. Mowed it, edged it, weed eated it. Her husband had just passed away. He took amazing care of her because he was like, Mark Driscoll said that, James tells us that we care for widows and orphans. And it was unbelievable to watch him and now he's a father with, he's a husband and a father doing an amazing job. He's broken the cycle in his family. I mean, these are his words that he's broken the cycle. Right. And so it's really hard to look at that and go, is that life any less changed just because Mark Driscoll was a crook behind the scenes or because he was a misogynistic bigot behind the scenes? Did God, and I think they posed this question really well in The Rise and Fall of Mars Hill, just because broken people do broken things and it gets messy and disgusting, is God's goodness any less relevant in that space? And I think there's something to really be said about looking at that and going, man, I have always felt funny about, and I even encouraged this kid. I was like, dude, Mark Driscoll makes me feel funky. Like, I just don't feel great about Mark Driscoll. And he was like, man, it's teaching me so much. So, we just have to take the truth on both sides, right? And I think we need to be wise and use common sense in that process as we are, I said earlier, walking through revival. And if we are walking through revival, that means things are changing around us rapidly. Liberation is happening to Jesus followers right now. Right now, it is Independence Day for followers of Jesus, independence from the American Evangelical Church. Right. But we are also building the plane in the air. So we have to be wise in looking at things constructively and critically and saying, this is good, this is bad, let's keep that, let's throw this out. And we have to be smart in that process.
I think it's up to each individual to decide what is worth keeping and looking at as good, kind of like what you were saying, Paul, and what to start questioning. And, I always think on this topic, I think about Ravi Zacharias.
I was about to mention him too.
That's a really good point. Yeah.
And I'm sure I knew people that loved him, that said his ministry and his teachings changed his life.
Right. And
he was a monster.
Yep.
It turned out with, for those of you that don't know, like it came out after, there were allegations ahead of time, but after he died, they did a full investigation and he had been repeatedly sexually assaulting.
And it is girls. The danger, April, and I'm sorry to interrupt you that.
Go ahead.
If we're not careful, again, on the other side of the thing, people were like, his ministry is too valuable to dig into this ugly stuff. There's too much good happening for it. And that's the other side of the coin that we have to be really careful of. Here's the crazy extreme of it is, you could say there were experiments done during the Nazi period of Germany that science had to say, we will not even look at that because we don't ever want there to be an opportunity for these heinous things, even though something good could come out of the research. And that's a real extreme, I understand. But you just have to say, even though Ravi Zacharias touched a lot of lives and probably had some good impact on people, the net is really bad, and we can't ever again say the good he's doing validates or justifies
Never.
covering up the bad.
Well,
ever.
and Tiffany said something really interesting in the chat. She said, I loved Ravi. Sadly, we threw away his books when we found out. I did the same. I had several Ravi Zacharias books on my shelf because actually one of the classes I took in seminary was the textbooks were literally 3 books by Ravi Zacharias. And so I actually learned to appreciate Ravi's thinking. I didn't always agree with him, especially as I started deconstructing from the American Evangelical Church, but I appreciated his process. And then when all of that came out, it sort of invalidated it for me. But
he was one I always felt funky about, by the way, and I never loved his stuff.
I felt the same way.
I never loved his stuff.
I always felt like, and I'm not trying to say this. I don't know. I was always like, if it came out tomorrow that Mark Driscoll was like physically abusing his wife, my jaw would not drop. You know what I'm saying? Just as brash and, ridiculous as he is, I was just like, no, probably it's just, I think that's who he, and I hate to say that.
It's
and
like the conservatives always talking about pedophilia. You're like, why are you so focused on pedo, by the way?
Yeah. Well, it's
projectionist to me.
It's like people, who always want to like sling, like, dudes who want to tell other guys that they're gay all the time. You're like, maybe
protest
you,
too much.
you doth protest too much.
I do like what Chris said in the comments, or Christopher. He said, my experience has been that the things that I would want to remain have been relationships with individuals, not the denomination or building. And I think that that's a really good distinction because a lot of the individuals and the smaller players really don't know or have any, a lot of them don't have any idea of when abuse goes on because the church covers it up. It's the leadership that needs to be held accountable. And a lot of times there's, they're almost like innocent bystanders in a sense. They're just part of the brainwashing, and they hear the same messages that the church wants them to hear. And so they're just players in it, but that doesn't make those relationships any less meaningful.
But I mean, so yeah, exactly. And I think the valid question to ask here is also because the American Evangelical Church became obsessed with celebrity culture because they wanted to match the American, culture or whatever. So I think that's the reason we started promoting and celebritizing, musicians and pastors and whatever, which, I think there's a lot to unpack there, so we're not going to get into all that. But I think the question that needs to be posed here is, what is more impactful on an individual's life? Is it the celebrity, the person that they, see on TV or the internet or whatever? I mean, let's be honest. Is it, the pastor from Oklahoma who has, 100-something thousand followers, or April or Paul, who have, 100,000 followers plus? Is that the thing, or is it the person that's just doing life with you right there in your midst? And I think the answer is always the person that you're right there around. And so I think that's the reason it kind of circles me back to the point originally of, I think community is so important. People that are doing life together is important. And that's the reason you have to look at each thing as we pull out of the evangelical church and we begin to dissect it piece by piece. We can't look at it as person by person or thing by thing. It has to be just little piece by little piece. Does this fit or does it not? And inspect it. And then, we're going to keep it or not. And I think that's what's got to happen.
Yeah, I think to take it outside of evangelical church, I would be curious what you guys would say to this. But Beecher asked in the chat, do you still listen to Michael Jackson?
No.
Oh, yeah. That's tough.
No.
Yeah.
No, I quit. To be real.
I mean, and doesn't it go to this bigger argument of the founding fathers of America who, did something fairly radical and amazing in founding the country while owning slaves, and Thomas Jefferson was, having sex with his slave and birthing slave babies. Do you? Whoops, you're upside down.
Yeah, there we go. Little rebellion now and then is a good thing.
And so, do we throw out all the writings of Thomas Jefferson? It's those are really tough discussions.
I was reading an article, and I think I shared this with you guys in pre-show. I was reading an article that they were interviewing Lin-Manuel Miranda, which I'm a huge Ham fan. You know, I'm a Hamilton fan for sure. By the way, secret about Jeremy Coleman. I love musicals, and I did. In fact, I do. I love.
I do too. I do too. I was pumping up Les Mis this week, man, and I've been listening to Les Mis music all week. I love it.
So I was a percussionist in high school, played on into college, and I love music. So anyway, they were interviewing Lin-Manuel Miranda, who, you know, famously obviously wrote Hamilton. Mm-hmm. And he was talking about how it was really important for him to make sure that as he was dialoguing the story, that he was not, you know, over heroizing or over villainizing individual characters through that process, because each one of those guys had their struggles. And I think you see a really good balance, right? Like there are times, even though Burr is seen as the villain in the story, or even historically, he is seen as the villain, somebody who was completely cast off after he shot Hamilton, right? You see, there are moments where you're like, I connect with this. I think of the song like in Hamilton, like I think of Wait For It, right? Like where it's like, he's just so like, I just need to make sure that people are okay with me and that I don't over upset anyone. And I just keep it down the middle and play it cool and don't make decisions too hastily, because I can wait for it, because there's all this pressure on me to be successful. Like that resonates so heavily. And I found him at that moment as the hero inside the story, because I was like, that feels like my life. And so I think there was a really good balance there of there is good with the bad every single time. And history has to step back and view through the lens of the entirety of the process and go, you know, the good outweighed the bad, or the bad outweighed the good. So I think when you look at a Ravi Zacharias, it's like, dude, your ministry was never okay, because all you were doing the entire time was sexually molesting people. You know, using this as a mode to just get your way. Yeah. So I think obviously is very obvious that it's bad, and you know, it way outweighs any good.
So I think to your point, this is something that I struggle with, but I'm always trying to remind myself of forgetting like the structures and the buildings, the churches, the leaders, the individuals, the people that really support Greg Locke, retweet his stuff, believe what he says. Can we find good in them? They refuse to get vaccinated. They go out without masks. They're quite literally harming people around them. But they are believing misinformation being spread by their pastor, by their leaders.
Are you saying the people that sit under them, or the people themselves?
Well, I mean, I guess both.
Greg Locke specifically?
I'm talking about just like the people in our lives. Someone mentioned earlier in the chat that they've lost family members to this cult, to this belief. And a lot of times I get messages all the time, people that didn't vote for Trump, or just because they're deconstructing, their very fundamentalist Christian evangelical family disowns them. Thinks they're a lost cause. Give them over to reprobate mind. They're abominations, whatever Christianese word they're called. But they are losing relationships with family over a difference of beliefs, really. Can we find good in these family members?
Of course. And I give people space to find whatever relationship with family that they need to hold on to, while saying you have every right to build boundaries and say it's not okay. And again, I always go back to, WWJD, what would Jesus do? So right. Again, Jesus, I don't think ever had a good thing to say about the mindset of the church in his day. And the leaders and the religious guys within that, mocked them to their face publicly on a regular basis, like just hauled off and mocked them. And we have to see, Saul of Tarsus had such a heart for God and for the Bible, but he was totally wrong in his approach. He killed people because of his wrong belief. And we have the same thing going on today. But can I keep relationship with a family member and find a boundaried space where, okay, we're not going to talk about Trump or anything like that, but I still want to be around my family and have my parents know my kids? Yeah, I give you permission to do that. But also permission to step away if you need to. Yeah. I mean, it's just such a hard, there has to be a tension there to say, I want to be connected to my family. I want my kids to know their grandparents, but I'm going to tell my kids, we do not believe like they believe.
Yeah.
And by the way, get to say to your parents, you don't get to try to teach that to my kids either.
Yeah.
You're not going to indoctrinate my children the way you did me. Yeah. Never had that conversation before. So I think, first off, let's back up a step. I passionately believe that everyone was created in the Imago Dei, the image of God. I honestly believe that. And so there is something good in all of us that God intentionally knit us together. I truly believe that. I also think that Jesus wasn't joking when he said, love your neighbor, when Jesus said, love your enemy.
Yeah.
I don't think that was a joke. And so, as difficult as it is to look across, whether it be the political aisle, whether it be to look across the belief aisle, whatever it is, the chasm that divides you, as difficult as it is to look at the other side and say, I still love you. I think we're supposed to. And that also means that sometimes I say, I love you, but I'm going to love you over here because you're bringing toxic nastiness into my life that I don't need.
Yeah.
While I value you as someone created in the image of God, and I value you as someone that God also loves, equal to me.
Yeah.
I am going to love you from over here because our relationship is not productive. So if I ever sat down kneecap to kneecap with Greg Locke, I would have some questions. I would have some questions.
Yeah, a few choice words.
I would have a few choice words. I would just be, yeah. Let's start out with, how dare you? No, but I would also try to keep in the forefront of my mind. I think about we'll get into maybe hate comment here in a minute, but I think about some of the gang pile or the dog piling that was happening on top of me today. Or the ganging up on, that's what I was trying to think of. The ganging up on that was happening to me today. I have to step back for a second and go, my flesh, and I know this sounds very evangelical, right? My flesh can't react to this. I have to allow myself to center and focus on how God views you before I act. And it's so hard, but I think it's a mark of maturity. And when we talk about taking good things into the deconstruction space, I think it's that maturity of focusing on who does Jesus say these people are? And how does Jesus love these people? And how did Jesus call us to love these people? That doesn't mean you have to love them in your circle. That just means you have to love them. And I think that's really
that's true. I'm curious what your, you said you had a hate video.
Yeah. I don't know so I emailed it to Paul.
You emailed it. All right.
Yeah. Sorry. I don't know.
Let me see if I can find it. The one thing about that, like what Jesus did though, and let me pull this up. When religious guys were attacking the marginalized, the woman caught in adultery, or there was a marginalized person, the woman caught at the well, he came to their defense at the cost of those religious people. And so I can have some place to see a Ravi Zacharias made in the image of God. Yes. But at the same time, 100%, it's terrible. And so I stand against people on TikTok every day and say, you don't get to say that shit to people on my page ever. You're 100% wrong. And Jesus is 100% pissed at you. Yes, you're made in the image of God, but you're being a total shithole right now.
Well, but
and you need to stop.
Let's talk about Ravi for a second. Like, you want to talk about somebody who was, demon possessed, like everybody accuses us of being, right? But like, at some point it's like, man, you've deconnected yourself so far from being an image bearer of God. Like, I'm sorry, but like, your entire ministry was built on lies and disgusting, just I just don't have words for that. And so at that point, it's like, man, I don't know. You just allowed the demon possession to take you so far down the road. You can't defend that. You just can't defend that. Like, there's just not a way.
Yeah, that's fair. But on the Ravis are the extremes of the situations. But just like I don't like when people demonize me and question my salvation. That is one thing that I try to do, no matter how off base from the teachings of Christ I perceive someone to be. I personally don't ever want to call into question their salvation, because at the end of the day, I don't know their heart.
Well, here's the question though, and this is the
Paul,
thing.
you're muted.
I have to wrestle with this so hard. Is Jesus's love enough for them too? Is Jesus's sacrifice enough for them too? And the answer has to be yes. And it sucks. It sucks.
But I don't think I have to sit down with them. No. Nehemiah said to Sanballat, I'm not going to stop the good work I'm doing to talk to you. And so I don't feel like I owe anything to them. Yeah.
I love you from over here, right? That just means I'm drawing a hard line in the sand and saying our relationship is toxic. It is not productive. Neither one of us are getting better. So it's not that I hate you. As a matter of fact, I love you as, somebody who is created in the image of God, who bears God's image, who God loves and Jesus died for. I believe all those things, but you and I together are water and oil. So I'm going to love you from over here. Let's not say we did.
Yeah.
All right. I've got Jeremy's hate video.
Okay.
Yes.
Okay. Let's see if I can play this. I like the look on the face already. Very nice.
Pretty proud of that.
Oh, let's see. How do I play it?
It is my hate comment of the week. Someone said, so I talked about, I posted this morning about Simone Biles, which we talked about at the beginning of the show. And I said, look, the only people, like the people that are complaining about this are mostly guys who, still talk about the glory days in high school, wear their Letterman jacket, and brag about their third place trophy in the men's softball league, keep that on the mantle. And then, who can't do a front flip on their kid's trampoline to save their life or whatever. Right. And so I caught, a lot of folks thought that was good. I was standing up for her because I think we should stand up for her, because mental health is just as important as physical health. And so I was proud of her. And so I wanted to stand in the gap and go, look, you armchair quarterbacks, go back to the Bud Light and nachos, stop it, be quiet, and so anyway, I caught some hate comments. This guy said something about, that I got bullied by the football team in high school, and that, be quiet, fatty. That's what he said.
Oof.
And
okay,
so
are we ready to play?
Yeah.
All right. How do I get, okay.
Apparently I was bullied by the football team in high school. So I reached out to former classmate and NFL cornerback Brian McCann, this guy.
This is picked off, intercepted by McCann. Touchdown, Dallas Cowboys. A 101-yard interception return for a touchdown from Brian McCann.
Brian says,
we did not bully Jeremy.
Well, I'm glad we cleared that. Oh, and one other thing. My wife loves this beard, and my dad died. So you can keep your opinions about my body to yourself because I don't need them.
That was amazing.
Always nice when you can bring an NFL player to your assistant.
As soon as I got that comment, I text Brian. I was like, "Hey, Brian, man." I was like, "You got just a second to shoot like a 5-second video?" He's like, "Brother, I got you."
That's hilarious. I love that so much.
I got the chance to play with Brian. I got the chance to play with Sam Bradford, who quarterback for the University of Oklahoma and St. Louis Rams. So I got to be around some. We did not bully Jeremy. Yeah,
I love that.
And so
you don't bully the beast, baby. You don't.
Yeah, that's right. That's right. I will rip you apart. But no, I got to be around some incredible athletes, some awesome people. Brian actually holds the Dallas Cowboys record for longest interception return, and he holds the NFL record for longest touchdowns in back-to-back weeks. He had the interception return for 101 and a punt return for 94 the following week against the Detroit Lions. He's an incredible athlete, 4.3 40, a really great guy to be around, but he loves his community. And so it was super fun to be like, okay, dude, I was like, I can flex on this really so hard, and I just had to lean into it. And so, it was a lot of fun.
That's awesome.
April, do you have a hate comment this week?
I do. So this week I changed it up a little bit. I'm going with more passive aggressive comment from a Christian. So Lisa said, "They know we are Christians by our love. So I'm leaving you a love note. May the peace of Christ find you and soften your heart."
Aww.
And I replied, "I think you meant they will know we are Christians by our passive aggressiveness." And she said, "It's amazing how you know my heart. No passive aggressiveness. That's you projecting. I love all people, even you. You don't have to accept my love." And then I quoted her, "May the peace of Christ find you and soften your heart," is super passive aggressive. So I don't accept your skewed view of love, but God bless. And then she said, "You are a very angry person. I'm still going to pray with you. You can't upset me as hard as you try. I know Jesus." And then in all caps, "Every knee shall bow."
Christian love.
Christian love.
Nothing like Christian love.
Christian love.
I love how she was like super judging my heart at first. And then I called her out and she was like, "You're judging my heart."
So I had a guy today who was like, says that. So on the Simone Biles thing, says the former tuba player or whatever. And I was like, "You misspelled NAIA baseball," is what I responded.
Ooh.
And he goes, "You look like the catcher from Sandlot." And so I just quipped right back. I said, "You're killing me, Smalls." The dude messages me and goes, "Okay, that was actually really good."
Nice. Paul, do you have one?
So I had a guy in a live that decided it would be really fun to call me Paulie. And I fucking hate that name, by the way, for a whole lot of reasons. It's a trigger word for me. So I asked him to stop and he kept doing it. So I muted him on the live. And so then so he goes into my DMs on TikTok and Instagram, sends me 30 FU messages, all caps. "You're not a pastor," blah, 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 just going crazy. And he said, I liked you and I liked your TikToks. Now FU. And I'm not kidding, 30 messages. And so I DM'd him back and said, "Hey, I think you need to consider your role in how we got here."
Yeah.
And I answered him strongly. And honestly, this is one of the moments you were talking about, Jeremy. I thought about it. And so then I messaged him again and I said, "Listen, I don't feel good about my response. I apologize. I'm sorry we got here." And he came back and said, "You know what? I'm a total idiot. This is totally my fault. I'm an idiot. I was trying to be funny. And when you called me out, I kept mocking you. And all of a sudden, now we're buds on DMs." And he told me he was acting like a 12-year-old. And I'm like, "Oh God, you're not 12, are you?" And he said, "No, I'm 18. And I'm like, "Okay, still, I'm the 55-year-old here."
Is over.
Yes. And so anyway, the upshot is maybe for the first time ever, I had a guy call me out with big all caps FUs. And then he came back and said, "You know what? I'm out of control. I'm out of control."
That goes back to what we were saying earlier, right?
Yeah.
Is talking about like, just good kneecap to kneecap conversation, or DM to DM conversation, whatever.
Yeah.
Is super important.
Soft word turns away wrath sometimes.
It does. And that's the reason those inner relationships are light years more important than the famous big faces that we see, and I try to remember.
Here's an interesting question. Do you worry about haters finding or stalking you? I know, Jeremy, you've had some of that ugliness for sure.
Yeah, I've actually had people do some pretty crazy, wild things, and it's made me pretty uncomfortable in public at times.
Yeah.
Which is weird, and I know that's what is with Jeremy and kneecaps. Like when you sit at a table, you're kneecap to kneecap with somebody. Sorry, I don't know. Maybe it's a Southern thing. I don't know. Anyway, but I've definitely worried about that. I had somebody. So we recently painted our house. Okay, like when we moved in, and we moved in only a few months ago, and we painted the house. And so this is how I know somebody didn't just grab this off of like Zillow or something like that. Somebody sent me a picture of our house since it had been updated. And said, "I'm going to come and kill your kids," and like said all this crazy stuff. I mean, I've had crazy encounters in public where people were angry. But the other day, I took my wife and my oldest daughter out to lunch, and this lady comes up and just gives me like the biggest hug I've ever had in my life. She's like, "You're the pastor from Oklahoma," and I'm like, "Yes." And she's like, "I love you, baby," and she kisses me on the forehead. I mean, it was like it was
COVID.
the best. Oh, huh?
It's like Delta variant.
I know. And I need to be aware of those things, but like, I mean, she was just so excited and she was so kind. And it just, I'm a person that I just love people. And so it was good, but there's good and bad that come with it for sure. I've definitely had some pretty.
How about you, April? Does that worry you?
Yes, it does, especially since I have 2 young kids. But
yes,
I try not to think about it.
I have a guy that keeps opening up new accounts, and so he controls my pay. If I block him, he'll open another new account, and occasionally say things that make me think I need to. And so and TikTok does nothing about this stuff. I keep reporting him, and they do nothing. And so, yes, it does worry me at times when somebody gets that crazy that he'll open a new account and tell me, "Here I am again through this account now." And no, it's not Whiskey Dick either.
I miss Whiskey Dick.
If someone like only listens to this episode, they'd be so confused.
Yeah.
Like, we missed Whiskey Dick.
If you just got to this point and you've only first heard about Whiskey Dick, start at season 1, episode 1, and have fun.
He was one of my original hate commenters. Yes.
Yeah, old Whiskey Dick, and it was the first time I watched April turn like 14 different colors of red.
Oh, I got
in about 3 seconds, and now April just like throws the questionable evangelical language out with no problem.
We're teaching her.
I wouldn't say with no problem, but definitely
getting
better. Yes,
you're getting a lot better.
Yes, for sure.
Well, another fine program, ladies and gentlemen.
Yes,
lady
absolutely.
And gentlemen.
Yes. Oh, and a happy birthday to Christopher in the chat on Tuesday.
Nice.
And don't forget to follow us on all of our Evangelical-ish pages now that we have expanded. And there's not a ton of content on there because I've been doing it, or Paul, I think you might have done one. Yeah. But anyway, when I get more time, more content will be coming.
And Jeremy hadn't done crap, so.
So follow us, like, subscribe, share, all the things.
Please do.
Yeah. Jeremy, I'm sorry we don't get to talk about Oklahoma and Texas leaving the Big 12 and Oklahoma State being really pissed off about it. So
I'm an Arkansas fan.
Oh yeah, we forgot about that.
So
there you go.
So I'm actually excited about Oklahoma and Texas joining the Big 12 because
they'll be SEC.
Yeah, that's what I meant. Sorry, the SEC because that means the Hogs will be coming to Oklahoma occasionally. So that'll be cool.
Nice. Yeah. And we all know the SEC, the highest paying conference in college football. So
it's the best conference in college football.
All right, guys. Fun episode as always. Good to see everybody, and we'll do it again next week.
Absolutely.
Bye, guys.